Saigō Takamori, stands on the jagged cliffs of Mount Shiroyama, his traditional silk kimono stained with the red clay of Kyushu and the blood of 1,000 skirmishes. Below him, the morning mist is being shredded by the rhythmic, mechanical thunder of 30,000 Imperial rifles. 500 remaining samurai, swords drawn, face a valley glowing with the modern electric lights of the Imperial army. This is not just a battle, it is the physical burial of a 1,000-year-old warrior caste. The air is thick with the scent of pine and gunpowder, a collision of two worlds where the blade is finally meeting the bullet. Just months ago, Saigō Takamori was a hero of the Meiji Restoration, the very man who helped modernize Japan. The new government had stripped the samurai of their status and their right to carry swords, effectively erasing their identity by decree. Saigō, the true samurai, retreated to his home in Kagoshima to start a private academy, seeking peace in a changing world. But his students' rage ignited a fire that forced him into a desperate march toward Tokyo. He was a man caught between his loyalty to the emperor and his devotion to the code of Bushido, leading a revolt that was less about seizing power and more about a dignified protest against the death of a culture. The ambition that drove the samurai for centuries was rooted in the ancient concept of giri, unwavering duty, and a spiritual connection to the blade as the soul of the warrior. For 1,000 years, the samurai were the undisputed masters of the Japanese archipelago, a caste defined by poetic refinement and brutal martial skill. These ancient echoes of the Sengoku period were visible in the way Saigō's men fought, rejecting modern firearms in favor of the katana. They believed that a warrior's spirit was more lethal than a conscript's lead, fighting to prove that the old ways still held a terrifying power. Even in a world of steam engines and telegraphs, they sought to prove that the code they lived by was more than just a memory. The siege was a duel between Saigō Takamori and his former protege, Yamagata Aritomo, the architect of Japan's modern conscript army. Yamagata respected his former master, but he understood that for Japan to survive in a world of Western empires, the samurai had to die. While Saigō was the soul of the resistance, Yamagata was the cold operator of its annihilation, utilizing telegraphs and steamships to surround the rebels. This was a battle between the ultimate invincible samurai and the birth of total industrial warfare, directed by two men who shared a deep history but no longer shared a future. The machine was now hunting the man. Yamagata brought Krupp cannons and repeating rifles, but he utilized a silent variable that the samurai couldn't conquer with bravery. It was the math of industrial attrition and the loss of the warrior's monopoly. The age of the individual master was ending. By training common farmers to use rifles, the government had neutralized a lifetime of martial training in just a few weeks of drilling. The silent variable was the democratization of lethality. A peasant with a week of training could now kill a master swordsman from 100 yards away. This shift rendered the individual skill of the samurai obsolete, transforming the battlefield into a forensic slaughterhouse where numbers were the only variable. While the official imperial records celebrate the triumph of progress, the shadow narrative reveals a much grimmer reality of the common samurai. Many of Saigō's men were lower-level warriors who had lost everything: their homes, their dignity, and their source of food. They were already trading their family heirlooms for rice long before the final stand at Shiroyama. This was survival, not glory. This shadow narrative is the reality of a middle class being systematically liquidated by the state. Their world was being deleted by decree. The final charge was not just a quest for glory, but a release from a world that had no place for them. The plan was simple: surround Mount Shiroyama with a 5-fold ring of trenches and wait. Yamagata turned the mountain into a cage, ordering his men to build massive wooden palisades and wire entanglements. Yamagata ensured that Saigō's legendary ability to escape would be neutralized. The logistical reality was a 60-to-1 manpower advantage, a gap that no amount of individual courage could bridge. The Imperial army fired over 300,000 rounds in a single day, a firestorm that made traditional samurai charges impossible. The mountain changed hands not through maneuvers, but through a slow, agonizing erasure of the landscape by unrelenting artillery and rifle fire. On the morning of September 24th, at 3 a.m., the Imperial army launched its final assault under the cover of a massive artillery barrage. Saigō, already wounded, realized the end had arrived. He sat in the traditional seppuku position and looked toward the Imperial Palace, performing a final act of devotion before his lieutenant assisted in his beheading. This was the exact moment the samurai class died. It was a final ritualized exit that denied the modern world the satisfaction of a captured prisoner. Honor was preserved in the abyss. Not a victory of arms, but a victory of spirit that would haunt the nation for generations to come. Yamagata calculated that the total destruction of Saigō's 500 men was necessary to prevent the samurai from becoming a permanent insurgent threat. He failed to calculate the psychological impact of their defiance. He viewed the samurai not as human lives, but as an administrative obstacle to be removed. This cold calculus resulted in the total annihilation of the rebel force. By the end of the day, not a single one of the 500 samurai was left alive. The Imperial Army had won the calculation, but they had created a martyr whose image would haunt Japanese politics for the next 70 years. Saigō's death didn't end the samurai ideal, it immortalized it, turning a defeated rebel into a national legend. Inside the rebel camp, the friction was a mix of religious fatalism and the raw fear of the conscript. Some samurai wanted to surrender to save their families, while others, fueled by the Satsuma spirit, demanded a final death charge. Saigō had to balance this, maintaining a calm exterior while the world literally crumbled into the sea. This friction was the sound of a culture collapsing in on itself, held together only by the gravity of Saigō's presence. They were bound by the shared knowledge that there was nowhere left to run, only the final bloody promise of honor. When the mountain finally fell, the cleanup was an act of forensic silence. Imperial soldiers, terrified of the samurai reputation, moved through the ruins with bayonets. Saigō's head was hidden by his followers, leading to a frantic search by Imperial officers who needed proof of his death to close the chapter on the rebellion. The invincibility myth was shattered, leaving the field covered in the broken remains of traditional armor and high-quality steel blades, a physical graveyard of a bygone era. The rebellion was over, but the silent broken steel on the mountain spoke of a transition that would redefine Japan forever. Modern excavations of Mount Shiroyama reveal the lopsided nature of the combat. The soil holds a story official history cannot hide. Archaeologists have found thousands of mini balls and Gatling gun casings concentrated in small areas, contrasted with the rare remains of traditional armor. The soil itself is a forensic map of the firestorm, showing how the Imperial Army leveled the landscape with sheer volume of fire. These sites tell a story of a surgical removal of a caste, a forensic reality where bravery was simply deleted by the efficiency of the machine. In this new age of industrial warfare, the individual master had no place against the mass-produced power of the state. Imagine a young samurai, the son of a lord, huddling in a shallow trench as the earth vibrates from Krupp cannons. He is holding a sword that has been in his family for 400 years, only to realize that it is useless against a soldier he cannot even see. The human toll was 40,000 lives lost, but the deeper toll was the psychological displacement of an entire class. He dies not in a duel of honor, but in a spray of lead, a statistic in a government's modernization report. The grandeur of the warrior elite was reduced to the silence of a mass grave and the sound of a shallow, freezing breath. The Battle of Shiroyama didn't just end a rebellion, it signaled the birth of the Imperial Japanese Army and the aggressive militarism of a new age. It shattered the myth of the warrior elite and replaced it with a state-controlled cult of the soldier. The individual was now secondary to the machine. The scar on time left by the samurai's last stand redrew the social map of Japan, turning a feudal society into an industrial powerhouse in a single generation. It remains the most poignant moment in Japanese history, the day the heart of the old world finally stopped beating. The old world was gone, and the path to the future was now paved with the steel of the factory rather than the steel of the sword. If you were standing on that cliff in 1877, watching the sun rise over a valley of Gatling guns, would you have traded your sword for a rifle to survive the new age? Or would you have charged into the abyss to preserve a code that the world had already forgotten? We judge the samurai for their stubbornness, but in the ruins of Shiroyama, we see a mirror of our own struggle with progress. History is written by the victors, but the wind on Mount Shiroyama still whispers the names of those who chose to die with their honor. At what point does bravery become mass suicide, and at what point does strategic genius become simple cultural destruction? Join the archive for more dark history and tell me below, what era should we unearth next?